My name is Tribeca. I'm your moderator for the evening. I'm the founder of the Bushwick Film Festival, and I've been an enthusiast of the Tribeca Film Festival since 2001. That was when I came to New York. I'm so proud to be here, and I'm happy to be sitting here with such an amazing group of people whose work spans from Gossip Girl, Lost in Translation, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Selma, and House of Cards. We'll just start by introducing the panel from left to right. If you could just say your name and just a little bit about yourself.
My name is Mary Cassidy Mosher. I go by Cassidy generally, but Mary was a gift from my mother, so I use it. I am a costume designer. My background, my degree is in fashion design actually. I'm a graduate of FIT, just a few blocks from here. So I had that background in the beginning, and then I just love costumes and building a character, which is a bit more of an individual, and less superficial, although I love fashion as well. And so I just kind of went in that direction after college.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Camille Harris. I'm the costume designer to Claire Underwood on House of Cards. And I'm also a red carpet stylist. I live here in New York. So I kind of get to float between both worlds, red carpet fashion and costume design for television.
Ann Ross, the production designer, NYU graduate, New Yorker. And I've never really done anything but work in film. I had an internship in high school, and I never really had another job. So just started as a PA when I was 17.
That's very unique.
Yeah, that was it.
I did a similar thing after college, but just started.
I think it's harder now, sadly, but internships are harder to get.
Yeah.
I'm Scott Dugan. I'm a production designer in New York City too. I started as a PA in film in 2003 and basically worked every job in our department.
Especially when it comes to Hollywood or the magic of filmmaking, we spoke about this on the phone a few days ago. Is you know, Hollywood or a lot of filmmakers or the film industry doesn't really want you to see the behind the scenes.
No,
they just want to see the magic of the screen. So can we talk a little bit about what it takes to create the world of the film as a production and costume designers?
I don't know, I mean, it's every project I think is different, and every director or team is different. So I think in the first beginning production, you are getting your footing, sort of trying to figure people out a little bit, because it becomes very intimate. So it's like dating in the beginning. Who do you like? Who's going to be your friend? You know, how do you navigate people?
Yes.
And then I think it begins evolving. And if you're lucky, you're in a space where you're free enough to just exchange ideas and throw even random things out there that get shot down, and then it builds. So, I mean, I find...
Yeah. I mean, I started out actually in the theater, and one of the things that's interesting about film as opposed to the theater, in terms of design and building, creating the world, is in theater, like the work of the designer is really apparent, because you have this stage and you have a set on it, and the set moves, and you see all the apparatus and how that works. And in film, one of the great things about being a designer is, I mean, I think in the costume designer, is that everything, even if you're doing Spider-Man, like it's taken, the world's literal to a degree. You know, Spider-Man's actually jumping off of a building, and you see that happen, or, you know, the clothes that they're wearing are the clothes that that character is just wearing. They're not, you know, a representation of anything. Everything's kind of seen through the lens of the camera and experienced that way, but it's all very real and hidden at the same time.
Very existential.
That's my existential space.
We have existential day jobs.
Scott, you know, I'm going to direct this to you. When we were speaking on the phone, you talked about how you approached the world from the character, but a friend of yours approached it from the actual, like a little further away from the era. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what that means and what the difference between the two is?
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably would all agree that you get a script, you read a script, you try to figure out what the story is, like what the core sort of hook or idea or sort of kernel that lets the audience into it. For me, that usually comes from the character. I sort of, the actor is, to me, the center of the story, and their journey, whether it's Hamlet or Spider-Man or Martin Luther King, you know, what they go through is what brings me personally to the story. I think for some people it's the historical context, or the, you know, they do use another, like a Marvel movie, like the Avengers, and it's the sort of great action sequences. But for me, it's been the character always, I think.
Is that the same for the rest of you on the panel? I mean, how do you approach creating the world of the film?
Well, I work on House of Cards,
Yeah.
and as we know, that government realm, the White House situation, there's certain expectations and almost limits that we have to kind of follow. Claire Underwood can't just come waltzing in a beautiful Yoshi Yamamoto asymmetrical whatever. It has to be within that box, within those expectations. So that, I'd say, is my only sort of challenge, is what can we do to make it interesting and more relevant and more true to the character, incorporate some more current fashion moments within the expectation of that storyline.
So you are a little unique in how you became a costume designer, because as you explained, you were a stylist, and then the character, Claire Underwood, she pulled you in because you were her stylist.
Yeah, Robin Wright's been a red carpet client of mine for a couple of years,
Yeah.
and when House of Cards lost their costume designer in season 2, she asked me if I would come on in season 3, just work with her. And there's another costume designer, Johanna Argan. She does everybody else. She's got the tough task. So I was really lucky that I got to join kind of stepped in the side door and leapt on for season 3. And it's been an amazing learning curve, and I've had a lot of supportive people, and I can't say enough about how difficult and challenging and amazing it is, all of that.
Challenging.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenging things working with Robin Wright?
I mean, well, Robin herself, she's not challenged
Okay.
at all.
Let the record show.
Yeah. I'm just saying the scope of production, and I'm constantly amazed at everybody, all the other teams, the production design teams, the lighting, the writing. I mean, all the different departments, that was such an eye-opener for me. It's just understanding, like you were saying, the village. We were talking backstage about the city that it takes to create this, to create that moment you see on the screen.
Literally all of you here
Yeah.
is how many people we work with on a daily basis, like on a film set.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because film sets can be different sizes. I know we spoke about like smaller budget films and larger budget films.
Yeah.
Cassidy, you actually have a film in the festival this year called Permission.
Yes, I do.
It was the budget was a lot bigger than Out of My Hand.
It was,
Yeah.
because Out of My Hand, I don't know if anybody has seen it. It's on Netflix right now. It came out. Did it premiere in North America at your festival?
No, I don't. It didn't premiere.
I know it was at Berlinale.
Yeah, it was at Berlinale. Well, no, it didn't premiere at North American Film Festival, but quickly, I'm a fan of Out of My Hand because one, it's set in Liberia, because I'm from Liberia, and number 2 is it's screened at the Bushwick Film Festival.
Mhm.
So I'm a big fan of the story. But let's talk about Permission and Out of My Hand, like the sets.
So Out of My Hand is half shot in Liberia, half shot in New York City, and it kind of chronicles the life of a very normal man. It's not, the director, Takeshi Fukunaga, is very clear in that he is not trying to make a political statement, but it kind of ends up just making you look at the world. He thinks he's leaving being a rubber plantation worker in Liberia for a better life as a cab driver in New York City. And so it's I won't ruin it for you, it's not really conclusive, but it's amazing. And so the scope was smaller, the characters had less money, so their costumes were very simple. I absolutely
It was also
love
a quiet film too.
It's very quiet. I love that movie, and out of being I cried when I saw it. So I just think it's a very touching, important story. It's on Netflix, so you can watch it. Whereas Permission, for those of you that saw it, and hope you get some form of distribution so more people can see it. It chronicles each character was so distinct and also had lots of ideas. And like you were saying, you get to know people as you start a project. I went onto this project and I was recommended and didn't really know anybody. and then started production right away. And it chronicles a heterosexual couple and a gay couple, both males. And so it was, the director himself is gay, and I felt like it represented that relationship really well in a loving manner, in a way that they aren't always represented. And the heterosexual couple is the reason it's called Permission is because it's about open relationships. It's not necessarily a postcard for them. And each person, each character was an individual, so I had to approach each one differently. And outside of set, they all have many relationships with each other. And so that was another thing to just handle too, you know, and like know. And so yeah, you just dive in and get to know that person. Why do they wear this sweater? Why do they wear this color? Do they wear relaxed jeans or fitted jeans? Is she more modest? Does she cover up all the time? Does she wear an underwear bra or a bralette? You know, those are really distinct characteristics, and that's one thing that I like so much about going from fashion to film, where it's like every person is an individual, and that's what we are in real life, in reality. And so I enjoyed it. So you just talk to, and I found that the best way to get the best character created, because the director has a vision, you have a vision, and the actor has a vision. And they might be similar, but they're all a little bit different. If you can have a three-way meeting, that's huge. And so we were able to do that with some of them, and it came out really strong. I think we created a lot of individuals.
That's amazing. I can't wait to see it.
I recommend it. Yeah.
Do you have is it going to go to another festival, or is it still like?
I think it will. I have no idea, but I think they're.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Sophia Coppola and Anne and your relationship. You guys have been collaborating since Lost in Translation, or was it before that?
I think that was the first movie we
First
did
movie.
together, yeah.
And now you have a film that's going to be premiering at Cannes
Yeah.
called Beguiled, which I mean, the trailer is like intense. Can you tell me a little bit what it's like to create the world of a Civil War era film, and maybe tell the audience a little bit about what Beguiled is about?
Well, Beguiled is, it's not really a remake, but it's a reimagining of Clint Eastwood made a film in '71 called Beguiled. And so it's the framework is the same, but it's a different interpretation of it, I think, from the female perspective. And we shot in New Orleans, and we were discussing this, and I loved the art crew down there, it was great. And I think during the period movie is similar to any film. I mean, you're really trying to discover the people. So I did a lot of reading of diaries and just women, not necessarily about the art department, but just women who lived in the South during this time, to hear a little bit about what their lives were like. And also it's about sort of confinement and isolation. And so everything's starting to build again. It's sort of, historically, I don't think we did all the research in order to be able to decide to dismiss certain things. Like, they would have not had so many candles because they'd run out of money. They wouldn't have had as much food. But we decided just because we wanted to light with candles that we were going to, make those concessions. So I think for period films, you want to learn as much as you can so that you know what you will use and what you won't. Because it isn't a documentary, and you want to use what will facilitate the story, and maybe rambling. But I'm very excited about the film.
Yeah.
I think the costume design is beautiful. I think the two of you will love it. And I think it's a very special film about women and made primarily by women. I mean, there were more women in key positions on that film than I've ever worked on. And so it was a really special project.
As I understand it, you were the one that gave Sophia Coppola the original film to watch, and then after she watched it, she was like, I have to get this film.
It's sort of roundabout. I gave it to her. I mean, we're very old friends. We kind of give each other a lot of stuff just to look at. And it was a movie I'd seen when I was maybe 12 or 13.
Wow.
And back when you had to watch what was on, and I would see it again maybe every 2 years, and something about it always stayed with me. And it deals with a lot of the themes that she has within her body of work. And I thought she'd be drawn to those threads, and she was. And so it ended up, a lot of his timing, just sort of, it ended up being the right movie at the right time. So she decided to do it.
I can't wait to see it.
It's fun.
Like,
I hope you like it.
You guys have to see the trailer. It's insane. If you can share with the audience a little bit about your background, like how did you become a production designer?
I've worked for almost too many people to thank on a list. Like if I could make a list of the people who have sort of helped me along the way, it's very long. But in terms of designers, when I graduated college, I sort of put everything in my car and drove to Los Angeles and started working for this guy named Alec Hammond, who's a production designer, who I worked for in 2003 and 2004. Actually, before that, it's kind of an interesting story, but the first movie I ever worked on, I was an intern in New York City over the winter. The movie never got made. It was like a Jim Carrey, Nicole Kidman vehicle, some strange big budget movie that this guy named Bill Welch was designing, who's an amazing designer. His art director was Alec, and Alec's art director in New York was this woman, Stu Lorillard, who's an unbelievably brilliant costume designer and production designer. She did Slumdog Millionaire. And the assistant art director in New York was Adam Stockhausen, who a couple years ago won an Oscar for his work on Grand Budapest, and who I later worked for on Bridge of Spies. And so in this weird way, like the first movie I ever stepped foot on, I just had this amazing group of people who I worked for. I worked for Alec for a little bit, moved to New York and started working for another amazing mentor, production designer named Mark Freeberg, who I did Selma with in Atlanta, and actually I did the sort of Alabama portion of Selma, which was a whole other story about how do you do period, and you know, Selma, Alabama now is not what Selma, Alabama was in 1964, and so those kind of questions of design and work for Mark, and he sort of really mentored, he sort of was the first person who was like, you know, you really should be a production designer and you need to do these things, and Adam had worked for him before, Adam Stockhausen, and then I worked for Adam, and it's a long road, but it's a very sort of experiential profession. You kind of have to do it to really understand what it entails and what it takes, and the questions you can be asked and the people you're going to be working with, and so, I mean, I was just lucky enough to have some great people along the way show me some of those tricks.
I think it's so nice too that as you go along, you make these friends that you can call. That I could call Adam and ask him about, because he had done 12 years of slave, sort of about certain curling things, or you can, and also just to be friends with other designers, because every project is different. You have to learn. This learning curve is always big, and it's nice to be friends with other people that do what you do. So. And once you become a designer, you don't work with designers anymore. So it's nice to, when you're starting out, the more friends you make who end up doing what you're doing is a really nice thing.
What do you mean when you become a designer, you don't work with designers anymore?
Well, because the production designer is the only designer on the movie. So, I mean, in terms of production designers, not costume designers. So I find that a lot of my friends that I made as I was coming up are still my friends, and that I can call. And also when I was young, when I first moved to LA, I liked David Waspo, and I just somehow found out how to find him, and he took me to lunch, and I didn't know him, and all these years later I can still call him if I have a question about shooting, have you shot in Vancouver, and you give me advice. So I feel like making friends and, is an important thing to kind of, for your work.
Yeah.
Kamal, you talked about, can you tell us a little bit about your background or your history becoming a costume designer?
You can apply this to film and television and general theater as well, and maybe music. It's all beautiful creative illusion, and it's something that we can all experiment with in our daily lives. So I grew up in the far west coast of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, a tiny, tiny little surf town. My parents were wonderful hippies. Basically grew up learning how to sew clothes and repurpose clothes with my mom. Vintage shopping, that's all we did. But that got my imagination running. And then I discovered Vogue magazine and real fashion, and I was like, I'm going to move to New York. But what is great about that, and I think it still applies today, is that all of this is just storytelling, and you can tell your own story through what you're wearing every day. We tell our stories through the design we put on our characters. There's really no right or wrong rules. It's what you wake up in the morning and decide to put on, what story do you want to tell. And you can change that every day.
What is your journey and your beginnings? And I know you worked at every level in costume design?
Similarly to Kamal, I actually grew up in a tiny town in Michigan, and so I couldn't wait to move to New York City when I found out about it and read some weird little tiny book as a teenager about a girl going to fashion design school.
What book was that?
I have no idea. Some little off the rack thing at the library. I was an avid reader. I still am. I am also like the fashion costume person that is massively interested in science, and so kind of run the gamut. But so I was kind of a nerd, but not really. And anyways, when I graduated high school, I had a great time, but I did a year of college in Michigan in fine arts, and then I moved to New York City and went to FIT. While I was there, I'm very interested in making things. That's one thing that I actually live part-time between New York City and Michigan. I've gone back to that tiny farm town now, and really excited to do so. But
So you're leaving Bushwick and going back to Michigan?
yeah, you know, Bushwick will always be in my heart and my home, and I feel like I'm here every other month. But I love green too, and so I really want to build a small company where I'm from. I really believe that, and even in this day and age right now, not to get political, but it's always been my goal growing up, and so now I'm kind of doing it in a small scale thing, so that's great. So I always knew I would go back there, and now is the time. But so I went to college. I costume designed a friend's NYU senior thesis in Williamsburg back in the day, like 2002, 2003. I lived across the hall from some NYU kids, and they were film majors, and they had a project, their NYU thesis, and so I costume designed it, and I loved it. I absolutely adored it. I was like, wow, this is one really long fashion show. This is cool. And then I graduated from college, and just I worked in markets and street fairs. Like back in the day, there used to be like a Tower Market. It's now a store or something, but next to what used to be Tower Records. And so I was just like street fair hippie girl that like worked there. And I met people, and this really cool chick came in one day, and she was a costume designer, and I was like, oh wow, do you need an assistant? And she's like, thanks, I have one. And I was like, well, do you need an intern? And she's like, sure enough, she was willing to take free help. I highly, highly recommend internships to anybody. I feel like this is something that changed post-recession, personally, from somebody who like 2007, 2008, we could find mad interns for any project. You put an ad on Craigslist, 15, 20 replies because you do one project. Honestly, I interned once. Treat it like a job. Act like you're getting a paycheck, and then it will become a job. You might have to take some part-time things, but like it will become your job if you work at it hard enough. And so that's what I did. So I interned for her. Her supervisor got me a job as a PA. From that job, I took a little gig in the winter. Then I actually was a set deck assistant. You know, you just go from job to job, and sometimes you can even answer ads. Like I would find them. There used to be this website called Mandy. It's all a different world now, and I don't really. That I don't have to look for jobs anymore. They come to me, which is awesome, thankful and blessed, but I feel like we're all probably like that. But when I used to look for jobs, they would look for interns, and I would say, hey, I'm in a place where I have to work, but I could part-time, or if you're looking for a PA, because oftentimes they don't advertise those jobs, I got 2 or 3 jobs that way, like paid gigs. They're like, yeah, we need a PA. And so then I went on from there and supervised and set costume, key costume. It's kind of the assistant designer on set almost. Like your eyes are, when the designer can't be there, you are keeping track of the clothes, continuity of something spilled something, all of those things. So I've had all of those jobs. I worked on Gossip Girl for all of the seasons, basically. I was a wardrobe truck supervisor there. Awesome. I continue to learn so much about fabric and materials on that.
There's someone that gave you a big moment, or was like, how did it fall? How did it happen?
It was that costume designer on the market. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, for me, breaking into television was definitely through Robin Wright, bringing me on for House of Cards.
How long were you working with her before?
About 3 years.
3 years.
For Red Carpet.
And how did you start working with her?
I have an agency that represents me, and I have good relationships with publicists. So a publicist represents certain actors. They say, oh, hey, law group, do you have a stylist who can come and hang out with this person? They need a few dresses, yada, yada.
I'm going to take a
That's
step
how
back.
I got
How did you get
connected.
the agency? How did you get there?
How did I get to the agency?
Yes.
I did as many free jobs as possible, worked on the weekends, reached out to students at fashion design school, young photographers, approached model agencies that needed models, testing for models. We would put together these little guerrilla photo shoots And we just kept doing that till one day, you know, one of the photographers would say, I got the local newspaper, let's do a fashion spread, or, you know, the little advertising job is finally happening at the mall. You know, we like built our portfolios until they were, you know, we were very proud of them. And I was able to take that portfolio and start approaching agencies. Please represent me. And so I did all that in Vancouver, made my way to New York, and here I am, 12 years later.
And yourself, was there a big break that you had in your journey?
I think it was, I remember that I had met the production designer, Dean Tavaleris. I was living in LA and I'd met him, and a girlfriend of mine was working for him. And he was working on a film, and I went back and I was staying with my parents, and he called me on the phone because the assistant had quit or didn't work out or something, and he said, would you like to come and work with me? And, you know, yeah. And I hung up and I just was jumping on the bed because I was so excited to get to work with him. Because I'd written, I think in film school, I'd sort of written something about him because he was my idol, and so that was, I feel like that was when it really was, I remember that so clearly still, all these years later. It's really cool.
I think after PA, I was living in New York, but I did a couple really bad movies in Boston. And I was looking for a job, and I was like in Boston. It's one of those communities where there's movie work, but there's not a ton of movie work. And I got a call to interview on Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I went in and I interviewed with Mark, and he didn't hire me.
Wait, we have to back up a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't just get a call to interview for Music Spider-Man 2. Let's back up a little bit.
Back up way behind there.
Let's back up to the point that your phone number is on the list for the call.
Phone number's on the list. Before my phone number's on the list for the call. Well, I mean, I had, at some point when I was PAing, I mean, I told the story of driving out to Los Angeles and like owning a renting a rent-a-wreck, which is a car they have in Los Angeles if you don't have any money. You can rent a wreck. And I'm driving around in that and spending my days at the Barnes & Noble reading before I got a PA job. But then I got into graduate school, and I think of it as my big break because, you know, I got into graduate school and learned how to draft and set design, and I was set designing in theater, but I wanted to get into film, and I had done these jobs in Boston that were big and bad, and so they were useful, I mean, great jobs in a way. I mean, I worked on R.A.P.D., which is a really big budget movie, but nobody respected it, I guess you could say. It's like, so that's how my number was sort of, you know, on the list. And I think when I got back to New York to work for Mark, I mean, I kind of consider it my big break because he called me back in after a while, and I ended up building models like in a, literally like in dark corners of the office, like in a corner of the office, and where nobody else was. And I think the costume department would walk through by and be like, oh, there's that guy building models. And I worked on that show from there until, by the end of the show, I was sort of like in charge of the location sets and seeing their sort of production. I mean, that big budget movies, often they go on for a year or more. You can be working on the same project. Just, you know, 10 months of pre-production, just designing what the look of the movie's going to be. So there's time to grow on one project.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Kamal. Can you share with us some of your best, well, the images that you really love the most out of particularly House of Cards? And then you mentioned something about Michelle Obama.
You mean like my favorite pieces?
Your favorite looks.
Yeah, season 3, you know, House of Cards is very political, and it's a lot of office meetings and boardrooms, and it's a little bit boring after a while. So we had an opportunity when the script came for costume design for a state dinner, and that was very exciting. So I was like, oh my God, no more pencil skirts one day. So I found this amazing gown through Ralph Lauren, which is the nice part of my job is that because I live in both worlds, both fashion and film, or television rather, I have all these established relationships with a lot of designers here, and I'm really lucky to be able to access their runway pieces and dig into archives. So Ralph Lauren's a huge fan of Robin, he's a huge fan of the show, and I was like, we need this gown. Like, it had just walked the runway, and I was like, I need this for the show. Can't tell anybody. And I need 3 of them, because in this particular scene, which obviously you've all seen, or at least seen season 3, I'm not doing a spoiler alert, she plays beer pong in this gray silk gown. You know, who knows even how much that gown was worth. But I was like, we're shooting it for 2 weeks. She's playing beer pong in all these scenes. You know, it was like my worst nightmare of like, what could go wrong with that gown? So that was, I think that piece is one of my favorites, just because of that fresh off the runway kind of fashion connection. It was really exciting. And then, I believe it was season 4, I designed a jacket for her, for Claire, that heads with this curved lapel, kind of like a 40s vibe, and was done in this beautiful blue tweed. And about 6 months later, somebody brought to my attention a picture of Michelle Obama wearing a really similar jacket. And I was just like, ooh, either she, you know, had it made for herself, or somebody else knocked it off, which is fine.
I'm sure because you're the okay.
That was exciting.
Not the record show. Cool. Can you, Cassidy, we talked about what are some of your favorite looks? You shared with me a few images via email. And I noticed that a lot of your looks are like flowy and like nature-like and light.
I get described flowy a lot. One of my absolute favorite looks on Permission is I won't try not to tell the story, but there's a point where Anna, the lead character, played by Rebecca Hall, who's amazing, she gets up from the bed from a sex scene, and so, but we wanted something very demure and modest almost, and not to show too much, but still be elegant. And this was actually my personal piece, and that was an independent film, so it was, on things like that, it's kind of a pull from all worlds to make it look like that was a larger budget, but I think it looks like a $10 million film, and it was about like 1 or 2 million. I'm not sure the final number, but it's a cream, long, like almost kimono-esque, but not. It's sleeveless and has a tiny cap sleeve, or just a panel here covered in like a blush with tiny like tulip rose flowers, almost an abstract print. That is probably one of my favorite things that I've seen recently. I actually have a short film premiering today in Connecticut that this director, I love working with him. It's very costume heavy, so I love color and I love texture. And so it was a Halloween based thing, and he doesn't want to do anything where you go and buy a store-bought costume, so you just make them all. That was some of them. There was the prison photo that I sent you. That was the same director, Keith Bearden, and he, previous project that we worked on, I don't even know how to describe his work. It's really out there. He's very big in Europe, but it's like just eclectic and weird and not always happy, but good and colorful and beautiful. And his thing is like, some people, you guys have probably found this, some directors very much care about the art direction and the costume, some don't. I like to work with ones who do. I will go really far for people, like, depending on what the project is, just for a passion project. But he always says the first thing that you see after you see their face are their costumes, and then their set. And so he's just, that's the most important thing. And so some of those images are, and then the images I sent you the next day are just some fabric sculpture and things that I like to do with light and fabric as well outside of film too, I think.
So what about the production, the sets? We didn't talk about it, but you also worked with, sorry, Anne, this is directed to Anne, with Noah Baumbach, who's, I like, I'm a fan of his films, Spirit of the Whale and Marble at the Wedding, which I thought was beautiful. I haven't seen it in many years, but I just remember like, walking away from the film like really moved. They might not be your favorite sets, but can you just share with us what are some of your favorite sets you've worked on?
I mean, both of those films I adore doing, and I love Noah's scripts. I mean, if you ever get the chance just to read his scripts as their own thing, they're just so entertaining, and you laugh out loud. He's such a great writer. And he'd been trying to get Squid and Whale done for so long, and we made that movie for no money. just no money. I think my budget was $30,000. And it was back in the day when you could get these incredible interns. And I had, I think, 5 or 6 women who had just gotten out of St. Martin's in London who could do everything. I mean, they could do everything. And at a certain point, I think the film went union, but they were incredible and kind of, it was very hands-on, and it felt like a sort of a film school project in that way, because everybody was doing everything. But I liked collaborating with Noah on really thinking about that time in New York and the personal details that these kids had, and you know what their room was like, and you know, just sort of trying to really flesh out the characters with, in the same way you're talking about costumes, but sort of what did they collect, what were their little items, and
I think about that, what's on their dresser,
yeah,
like
exactly.
next to their bed.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like that's I feel like that's, when I read a script, I don't think about it from design, I think about it, do I want to make this movie, do I want to see the movie? And even if the design is sort of, the whole point is to be bland, I would prefer that, because I want to be involved in making films I like, not picking projects where the design is somehow featured. And I'm getting off topic.
No,
but
that's really
it's all really good information.
But I
Yeah.
love, I mean, Squid and Whale still, when I watched that, that was my time in New York too. So
Okay.
and Noah and I both grew up in New York, and we're kids of writers, and so we had a lot of sort of fold over in that way. And
Was that your favorite set, or was there something
No.
else that you?
I don't know. I feel like that was certainly one of my favorite films to work on. I love doing Lost in Translation, but my father was very ill then, so sort of I still don't watch that movie. And Margaret the Wedding, I love doing that. I got to work with Harris on that, and it was just that was a wonderful experience for me, because I feel like with him, I got to collaborate and kind of be more involved in how things would look, because he and I got to discuss things so much.
What's your favorite?
I was thinking about this today, Glenn, that I think my favorite set are often ones that I just finished. So I just did a movie in North Carolina, and that's not out yet, obviously, but I'll describe one of my favorite sets. I mean, sometimes you get projects where you have $30,000 or $10,000 to do all the sets, and what that means basically is that you have to find it. You know, you don't have money to build fantastic, rooms and apartments and things like that, so you have to find the right place. And this movie I just did took place in 2004. Most of it was easy to find, but there were a couple of quirky sets, and one of them was this counterfeiter's office. And in the part of the story, it's a movie called American Animals, and the part of the story, the kids who are essentially planning a heist from their college library, they're looking for somebody who can help them figure out how to plan it, and it really kind of becomes a broader, sort of more film cinematic story. And so we had to find this cinematic place in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Charlotte, North Carolina, but one, there's not a lot of cinematic stuff there, and two, it's all very new. They have a habit, as they do in Atlanta, where a lot of movies are made, of tearing down old stuff. But we found this old lady, like near the football stadium, who had preserved her office selling like motor parts from the 1950s. She had the same office, had the same wallpaper. I mean, they had like a rack with the old folders that you flip through, like no computers. I mean, they had computers, but it was just this amazing. It was basically a set. You open up the door of this old factory in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you're just standing at a set. You're like, this is the weirdest, most amazing place I've ever been to. So, and then you open up the back. You go through the office, you open up the back, and it's like a parts warehouse for General Motors. And that, I mean, my favorite set right now, that would probably be the one. It's just an amazing place that we just happened to walk through one day.
So I want to know if this is a proper representation of production and costume design world. Is it a lot more mostly female? What's the world like? What's the diversity like? How is your crew?
To me,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a big problem
Yeah.
still. and I always hire almost everybody in the art department is women. And, going back to the conversation about interns, I feel like since Black Swan, there was a big suit with, I don't remember, was it Warner Brothers or something?
Yeah.
And that's when I think internships became harder because people had to be paid, it sort of had to be done in a different way. But I really wish there was a way to have interns the same way the DGA does for every single department, so that you can start hiring people so there's more diversity, because they're just, and I don't think it's an intentional thing, I just think it's been going on that way for so long that the only way that we're going to switch that is if we can get young people in, give them opportunities, and then it will even out, because talent will win out. It won't be because your uncle had a job, which is the way the union works a lot of the time. But I feel like, I don't know about you guys, but I really try hard to support other women working and to bring that diversity, to try to do, because when you get on set, grips are still almost always all men, and most of the time the cinematographers. And so I feel like as much as we can do to switch that balance is a good thing.
Absolutely.
But that's my thoughts on the subject.
And just regarding internships, even outside of gender bias, it's hard, and I'm finding this lately too in past years, because when you're on a set, a wardrobe costume department is 10 to 15 to 20 people big on any given day, so there's lots of jobs available. It's hard to hire PAs, and what we're having to do now, because there's no internships, hire people who don't know what they're doing. And it's really hard to go to college or learn this before you do it. I couldn't have ever learned what I know now if I hadn't just started working in it, started interning. And so I just highly recommend that completely. But regarding the other thing about women, I feel like our department's a little different. Personally, costumes, pretty much predominantly women. I almost feel like it's the one unit or department that's different. It's actually more progressive to have males in your department. I like a balance personally too. So yeah, but absolutely all the other departments on set. Men.
I mean, I know.
No offense, but
Once construction is on board,
Yeah.
it's sort of, in the prep phase, it's always me and a lot of other women in the art department. Props tends to be guys too, but once you go into construction, it's almost everybody is men. And do you work with Elizabeth Lynn?
Yeah.
Elizabeth Lynn is a wonderful scenic, and every time I'm in New York, I try to hire her. But I feel like, I don't know, I'm a broken record.
And I think just coming to a place where there's just an equal seat at the table, and this is not, men tend to be more verbally aggressive in stance, and I don't mean that in a judgmental manner, it's just the way that you are, and women are sometimes a bit more, let's have a conversation about this, let's talk this through, let's calmly come to a conclusion, and just bringing both of those realities to the table is something really good. It's something that's great, and I'd like to see more. That was one thing I liked about Permission, just on a side note, is that Brian Crano, the director, mentioned during a similar costume answer panel for a director, but that he's name a female lead who has sexual agency and is not a psychopath. A woman who actually has sex, likes it, and is looking and trying to figure that out, and just having strong women who are still normal is a huge thing in the industry, both on screen and off, because you get labeled a bitch. It's okay to be strong.
Yeah. Kamal, you have an interesting background. You're Native American, right? What is it like? I'm sorry?
Well, my mom is, my dad is Welsh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is it like? What is the percentage of Native Americans in the film industry? Not that you have to know the exact percentage, but is there a lot? Or
not that I've worked with on my own daily basis. I'm sure that there's many that do great projects, but I'm not that well versed in them, so I'm not so sure about that. I'm originally from Canada, and the arts community there is really supportive. The government gives me grants, and I think that they support Indigenous culture and people doing directing and documentary projects there, maybe more than in the States.
This conversation about interns has come up a lot, and I understand that it's definitely a handicap higher up to have less free labor available, but it's also enormously expensive to live in the city.
I think somebody mentioned the DJ internship,
Yes.
the DJ trainee program.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us would agree we would love if there were a production designer trainee program or a costume designer trainee program. I mean, that's a paid position where you take a test and you get jobs on films doing it. I mean, I think that I totally understand this. Not having money coming to the city is, there's, you know.
I called my union about this and wrote them a letter because I really feel it's important to try to do this. And I don't know if they're going to do anything about it, but I feel like we had incredible interns on the last film I did, but every single one of them went to Harvard, and their parents somehow was very high up in the film industry because now you can't get that job anymore. So I feel like there has to be a way, and I know what you mean about if you can't pay the rent, you can't, but it's kind of,
Yeah. I know.
it's just
I walked
sticky
that
point.
path too.
Yeah.
Like I was not subsidized and I worked part-time and went to college, and then like that's why I answered those ads. I was like, I can maybe part-time intern for you, or I need a paid job. And sometimes those turn into paid jobs. Otherwise, give what you can. You know, designers on the weekends, especially in independent films, are probably working. Like, and if you can help them go carry bags and shop, or if you want to do production design, probably go carry bags and shop. Like same thing. That's a way too. And the city is only getting more expensive, and I know that. It's just a change, I think, in culture that.
I think it's also the legal rules that they won't let
That
you.
after it was abused. It was
Yeah.
especially in the fashion industry. I know in like 2008, 2007, it was highly, highly abused. And so I understand why we got to where we are.
I gave a talk at a college recently, and one of the great things about our industry and the jobs in whether it's set deck dressing or construction or the art department is they are actually union. Once you get the job, they're union jobs, they pay well. And so there are actually a lot of jobs for people, and I think opportunities in the city right now.
It's like the busiest time in New York City, I think, ever in the history of film.
And there's no,
So it's a good time to break in.
there's nothing wrong with set dressing on a set, you know, and then becoming a production designer. A lot of people have done that.
I want to bring that up too.
We're gonna
just-
keep on talking about this.
Yeah,
No,
there's so many jobs.
Yeah, it was tough for me when I was in NYU. I interned, but I also had to work after school. So I did school all day, then I worked, and then I like had to intern. It was like I couldn't hang out with friends, and I felt like scared. Yeah.
My best experience is the producer who will keep me abreast of every change ahead of the curve. So, hey, Camille, we just found out that this is completely changed and you need this for tomorrow, you know. Just getting on the phone and being communicative and giving me the head start for any upcoming changes, because that helps me prepare. So that's one thing I really appreciate.
I think budgetary, this is really like getting into the nitty gritty, but layman's terms, like as a costume designer, when you start a project, if you want to have 3 options there on the day for the first fitting, you need 3 times the budget. That's going to get returned, but I need cash flow. Like, that's kind of how I feel. And that's always like a conversation that is, that ends up happening, but that's a really important thing to me.
I think that, when you have, a lot of times when you have a producer that's really experienced, they immediately know that certain things are costs that are defined that cannot move. So often when you're working with someone less experienced, they're just always trying to chip away at money in any way that they can. And I find that really experienced producers know this is what this is going to cost, exactly as you're saying. Like, there's no way getting around that. You have 3 old actors in the
You
summer
want 3
heat.
sizes.
You've got to have X amount of clothes to keep up with that.
Exactly.
And you know that. And I feel like if you work with a producer who knows what they're doing, it makes the amount of kind of conversations about the budget more productive and less often.
When you're looking for assistance, because I have wardrobe experience and art department experience, what are you looking for when you're speaking to a young, fresh artist to be assistants, potential employee? What are you looking for?
You.
Yeah. Your kind
I'm
of
available.
energy.
I'll just right here when you come.
We'll get lots of phone numbers.
Passionate, excited, wants to be involved. People that show up on time, that's a big thing. Can't flake out,
Yeah.
but the excitement,
It's hard work.
Yeah.
Showing up
hours.
with enthusiasm.
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
like the skills come afterwards.
I think so, yeah, because if you're passionate about it, you're going to learn all that. So you want somebody, also people who are willing to say when they don't know something is so wonderful that you can kind of, because we all have to do that. Like people who just say, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
Figure it out and don't pretend.
Ask
You
questions.
know?
Quick questions. We talked a lot about like what your experiences have been, but I'd love to also speak to kind of what your future is. Is there a genre that you guys haven't worked in yet that you're all still really excited about working in, or is there like a favorite genre of film that you guys have? Because I'd love to think that 20 years in, I'd still be really excited about that thing that I haven't done yet.
Science fiction.
Yeah, something futuristic.
Yeah.
I love imagining that.
I don't know, I mean, I feel like I read the script and if I like the story.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'd like to make movies that they don't make anymore. Like when we came in here, I thought of Clue, you know, and all the women are sitting there. And sort of, I'd love to be able to, you know, work on a movie like Tootsie. Sort of a New York, great, just funny story.
Yeah.
So I feel like those kinds of movies that aren't made anymore is what I wish I could do.
I mean, for me, something like Selma, something that has real like weight to it as a story. You know, there are some great movies this year. Beguiled sounds Beguiled. Is that what it is? It sounds just amazing. Moonlight, you know, was the movie, and I was so happy that won the Oscar. I have to say, but I was like, is it gonna win? Is it gonna win? But like, you know, there are just storytellers out there who have a real, you know, like Anne was saying, just a passion for deep voices and deep characters.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.